Hi, everyone. My name is Alan Thompson. I manage enterprise data and analytics for the Hanover Insurance Group. I've been there for about 5 years. Most of my career was with Bank of America. I built and managed data and analytic organizations across almost every line of business that they had. And Daniel and I are excited to talk to you today about a case study, accelerating data governance adoption at Hanover. I've been doing this for a long time, and as I said, I come from an end user perspective, so I build and manage data science and analytic teams, right? So data scientists, data engineers, reporting folks, business intelligence folks, and so over the years, for years, there was this level of frustration, and again, the level of frustration at Hanover where, I've got data scientists who are building models, takes them about 6 months. 4 months of that is dealing with bad data, wrangling data, combining data, cleaning data. And it's frustrating for them because that's not what they want to do. And it's frustrating from my perspective because I have long lists of things to do for my business partners. And normally it takes them 6 to 8 weeks to build a model, but so 6 months, 4 months of it is data, and 6 to 8 weeks is actually building the model. So there's a huge opportunity cost where I could build 3 times as many models if I had better data. The second problem is when we kind of build a lot of these things, we end up using Visual Basic Code or SQL to come up with ways to get the data ready for basic reporting and dashboards and things like that. So all of a sudden, my group now owns all of these production processes to create data. Again, very frustrating. It's not necessary. It's non-value added work. And then the third and final piece of it is the, I'm going to forget the third and final piece of it. Anyway, so you get it, right? So, we take on all of these things that we have that we shouldn't be doing, that eat up a lot of our time, and it becomes very frustrating. So, when I came into Hanover, one of the reasons I was hired was to try to kind of fix this sort of thing. So the other piece of this that I have found in my career doing this is when we set up data governance as a standalone thing, it becomes very adversarial, right? So one of the things that we did at Hanover, we decided to make data governance part of our data strategy. So I'm going to have to start using my hands here. So we have an enterprise level data strategy at Hanover where we want to be in 7 years. And then we have business level strategies to support that and their own kind of where they want to be in 5 to 7 years. The reason that we kind of approach this, and then we have data strategy, which is an enabler of those business strategies and enterprise strategy. And we have 6 pillars of our data strategy, and the most important one is data governance. By wrapping data governance into our data strategy, it allowed us to be more collaborative with our business partners, right? So it's again, we need data governance to enable our data strategy, which will enable our business strategy. So it kind of made this a much less adversarial kind of way for us to be able to roll data governance in. So, and again, I'm just kind of giving you the business background of how we got to where we're at, and Daniel's going to talk about how we actually did it with Purview. So again, data governance is part of our data strategy, hugely important. Accuracy, consistency, you can read all of these things, but we needed to make sure that our business partners appreciated and understood that without having these parts of, without these things within data governance wrapped up in our data strategy, we weren't going to be able to achieve the goals that they wanted to achieve. Again, the strategic approach. This was hugely important. And again, I'm going to go through these because, again, the last page in the deck, there's a whole bunch more of these, but these were the 6 or 7 most important ones that we found as we went through this strategic approach to achieve adoption of our data strategy, which, again, the governance part of it was a big piece of it. So again, senior leadership buy-in. We needed to make sure when we're at the table competing for dollars for data governance in our data strategy, a lot of times our senior leaders really didn't understand what data governance is, right? They hear information governance, data governance, so it was a challenge to make sure that we had them buy into what this actually was and the value that it brings to the company. 5 years ago when we started, we created a data governance team. We created a data governance advisory council, and we got representation from across the company. And just as a side, a lot of this stuff has been done in parallel over the past 5 years. You can't just kind of do this sequentially. You can't kind of wake up and do it all at once. We've been kind of working on these things in parallel over the past 5 years. So this team, this Data Governance Advisory Council, We use this to craft our policies and procedures. We use this to kind of, have representation from across the company. It's about 35 people, each represents a different area. They go back and cross-train back to their areas to make sure that the word's getting out and they're doing the education and training. Again, long-term commitment, we need to make sure that our company, a lot of times these problems have, evolved over decades, right? And a lot of people want to kind of solve them overnight. And the way we kind of funded a lot of this stuff at Hanover was through IP. So one year we might get some money, the next year they would cut it in half, the next year they would give us nothing. So we try to make sure that we got a lot of this, laid out for data governance and our data strategy as a long-term kind of commitment, so that we got a base foundational funding over year that we didn't have to worry that it was going to be taken away. We needed that consistency to make sure that we could develop the program over time. Value proposition, we have tons of metrics that we're tracking on this: efficiency, revenue, customer sat, employee sat, making sure that we lay out that we have KPIs and that we're tracking benefits to the program. Because a lot of times data governance is seen as, everybody hates data governance, like they hate audit people, right? You're adding overhead, you're adding hurdles to me finishing my project. So a lot of times we were trying to make sure that we were deflecting a lot of this kind of, as people came back to us and said, well, what value is it adding, or how are we making money, or how is it adding value to the bottom line? And so we're making sure that we track a lot of this stuff. We came up with really great policies and procedures, but there were documents, right? And the hard part was, because Hanover is very decentralized, there was nobody had a stick to enforce any of this stuff. And so we had great policies and procedures, and everybody in our Data Governance Advisory Council accepted them, but we weren't making much headway in achieving data, in achieving data governance, because we didn't have a platform. Education and training, again, great. We've been doing a lot of that, but the tools and technology is key, and that's what Daniel's going to talk about, because we had a tool, I'm not going to mention the name, that was never implemented properly, and it was kind of no better than a Word document, right? It was, people would go in and, put in a term, and they would put in a definition. We had set up the process to the data steward process, right, for us to review these on a monthly basis, but it was an offline kind of platform. Any changes to it weren't recognized. It was a mess. When I started 5 years ago, we had about 2,500 terms in there. I think we have like 150,000 terms, and we only had 2,500 terms in our data dictionary, right? So again, it was horrible. So we've made a lot of progress on that. I love this slide. Again, this is the Data Governance Institute, right? I always use this slide as I go into these companies and talk to them, because this is kind of, a great way to look at data governance. But I always tell companies I'm in that this is, something to aspire to, but you have to, every company's different, and you've got to set up your data governance program that works for the company you're in. Because this right now, if I walk into a company and, this is going to cost $4 or $5 million to implement, it's going to fail, right? A lot of times what I've done, and we've done at Hanover, is we've taken pieces and parts of this and we've adapted it to the company. We're making sure we have a data steward process, and we have a chief CDO. We've got pieces and parts of it, but we've been able to do this kind of on a very shoestring budget and prove our case. One of the things that we struggle with I've struggled with at Hanover, we've struggled at other companies, is we never have enough funding to do everything we want. Never. Nobody does, right? And so what happens a lot of times is people will say, oh, it's $3 million, it's this much money to do something, and it goes on our priority list and it gets kicked out for a few years. And years ago at Bank of America, when we would be, working with the federal government and the OCC and all this sort of stuff, a lot of times if you had something in place and somebody made a mistake, they were much more forgiving than if you had nothing in place and you make a mistake. One's a mistake and one's negligence, right? So a lot of times where I find companies get a little, they fall down is, so Hanover says, well, we don't have the money, we're going to keep kicking this can down the road, we're going to keep kicking this can down the road. And so what we've been able to do on really a shoestring budget with nothing is to be able to kind of get us 85% of the way there with data governance, because We didn't go for the full-blown thing, right? A lot of these folks don't have the attention span. They start coming up with these huge numbers to solve 100% of the problem. We probably got us about 85% of the way there for not a lot of money. And Daniel's gonna kind of talk about that. But you can read these again. You know, these are kind of the characteristics of data governance that we have kind of tried to ingrain in people at Hanover in terms of, you know, a strategic asset and all of these other things. But as I said, I use this as a kind of starting point, but you know, we only implemented parts of this. Going in and creating a full-blown data governance office in a company that has never done data governance before is never going to work, right? It's just too much, too quick. Again, without the right tools, and you know, we see this all the time. We put these policies and procedures in place, but again, if we don't have any visibility, if we can't do data classification, if we can't do lineage, if we can't do all of these things around data governance, it all becomes anecdotal, and there's no kind of way for us to, you know, monitor this, track it, and keep an eye on it. So, does anybody have any questions? I forgot to mention, if people have questions as we go, does anybody have any questions? Feel free to throw them out. Okay, so Daniel, you want to hop up? I'm going to turn this thing off.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Daniel Letterman. I'm Director of Analytics in Hanover. I've been there for 3 years. And basically what I do is I run a team of data engineers. And before I started this job in Hanover, I was in the technology department in Hanover, and most of the data efforts at Hanover were made ad hoc in a sense that whenever somebody required some data, somebody put a group together, write a bunch of ETLs, wrote a bunch of SQL, and try to create those pipelines that create that data set for that particular process. Our point of view is that we need to create the tools and the processes to have the data flowing continuously from source to destination. And that's what I noticed talking to the business and talking to the technology, that we didn't have like a central piece that allows to create that bridge between how the data looks and how the data should look. And that's why we had this tool that was part of a stack that we inherited that we spent maybe 3 or 4 years trying to implement. And there were very costly projects of people just typing in terms into this tool, and basically became a catalog of terms. But me being new to Hanover 3 years ago, wanted to use the tool to actually understand where the data is, what are the data assets, where they reside, what is the lineage, how, when I see a report, how can I see where the data is coming from? And this tool was not giving me any of that. It didn't have definitions of tables, it didn't have definitions of fields. It did have some data owners, but if you're talking about 30,000 different terms and you have 3 data owners, it's impossible to get to them and ask them, hey, what do you mean when you talk about that? So basically, what we did is we saw this tool and we noticed that the main problem is that our data strategy was moving in one direction and our tool was heading us into a different direction. Most of our data strategy now is based on the cloud, and this tool is not set up to look at cloud data. A lot of our business requires us to manage unstructured data, not just structured data. Again, this tool is set up for structured data only, on-prem resources, not cloud resources. We started to put in databases in the cloud. We started to use data lakes. We started to use Power BI a lot in the company, and there was no way of being able to see what was happening with the data in those unstructured places. So we needed to have something different. We could not continue on a data strategy diverging from where our tool was setting up. So we came to the, So we came to the conclusion that we needed a new way to doing things. And as I said, we adopted this technology, and by adopting it, it was part of a software stack, and it's a very expensive software stack. And because the software is expensive, maintenance is very expensive. The machines you need to run it are expensive, and support is lacking because not many people know how to use these tools properly. So we needed a new approach in a sense that we were not going to be given enough money to be able to say, hey, let's go to the next generation of that tool and let's implement it. So we looked at it actually, and we're very sizable investments to be able to go to the next generation of the tool. That takes advantage of the new technologies that are coming into place, like AI, which becomes very important when you're doing data classification. So we looked for alternatives. And one of the alternatives is, can we have something that we can make a quick POC where it'll be inexpensive, we can demonstrate the value, we can bring the business in, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Let's fail quick. That's why we adopted Microsoft Purview. So you can see a lot of the benefits of Microsoft Purview in the slide, but the main reason was because we needed that flexibility to be able to adopt a tool that allows us to first align with our data strategy. So we are heavy Azure users, so definitely to use Microsoft Purview, just go to your Azure account, set up a new resource, and that's it. You pay as you go, and basically you pay whenever you scan a new data source. So it's very inexpensive. It was not noticeable in the budget of IT if we were doing that. So I was able to create this POC that show value to the business. Connecting this not only to our on-prem data sources, and now at the end of the slide I'll show you some of the data sources that we actually connected to, but show that we have information about unstructured data that nobody was looking at. So we have compliance and information governance where they see how they're using the data, but mostly it was focused on those structured data sets. If somebody wanted access to a database, they just put a ticket and say, this is your user, you can go to the database. What happens to the data afterwards? What happens when you extract the data, put it in an Excel file, or put it in a Power BI dashboards? So we were able to scan 10,000 different Power BI dashboards and classify the data with it and say, hey, be careful, because in these dashboards you have PII, where maybe you shouldn't be distributing these dashboards all around the company. So visibility was one of the most important issues. The other is that we can do this incrementally. We can iterate over the different scenarios with the business, and maybe we can adopt one data source, and that data source can be demonstrated that the value we're giving to it. So we're able to scan the information from that data source, bring the business that uses that data and show them, hey, this is your classification. This is how your data looks like. And we are still not in production. We are still in a POC environment where basically it costs nothing to be able to do this. So those are the main reasons that we were facing. Again, if you have questions, please interrupt. The other thing is there was a big investment in the previous tool, not only to paying the licensing, but also we had projects when I was in the technology department where we had 3 or 4 people dedicated for 6 months just to input data into that new tool. That was impossible because we have new IT projects all the time. Every time a new IT project comes, we are asking data governance requirements to say, hey, you need to put all your data elements into this IGC tool. And they say, well, I don't have the budget to do that. I need to hire 3 people to spend maybe 3-4 months just doing that. And that money I can use to actually implement the data solution that I've been asked to do. So that was not working. But there was a lot of information that we need to extract. And we knew that executive leadership wasn't going to approve a project where we say, hey, forget about those 5 years of people inputting 33,000 terms into that old tool. We're going to start from scratch. So we needed also a tool that is open. And the good thing about Microsoft Purview is based on an open source architecture where you have APIs, where actually we developed the code to be able to extract the data from the old tool and input it into the Purview, into the Purview catalog. Not only that, not only were we able to extract who the owners were, who the stewards were, and the definitions of the terms, but independently, we were able to scan data sources of maybe 10, 20 terabytes databases, and then with the program, we were able to match one to the other. We were able to match the data sources that are being scanned directly from the source against the terms that were input throughout the years through this new tool, and we also prove that that is possible. So that will get us over the edge in the sense that we have a low-cost solution, and we have a low-cost way of bringing everything that you've done before and bringing it into this a new environment. Basically, the strategy that we follow, and I'm using the word iteratively here throughout the steps, but basically is what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? And as I said, why we started to do it and why we in data engineering started to do it, because we needed something that allows us to understand the data that we had to be able to serve our clients, our customers, our business. So we needed that tool. So if it was not going to be used for data governance, at least we can use it ourselves. So for that, we needed this low-cost solution. And our strategy was, let's implement something that we can demonstrate value and go step by step. And the good thing is, when we're talking about the old tool, incrementally meant putting more data elements, more data sources, and just putting more terms, and that's it. With Purview, incrementally means, of course, that we need more data sources and more terms, but there's a lot of more functionality that the tool provides that it's incremental also. And if you are users of Azure, you know that every time Microsoft comes with a new way of doing things, they put it into the tool, and because you have it in the cloud, you're able to use it whenever you want. So AI concept, for instance, for classification. This tool allows you to use OpenAI technology to be able to classify your data. So not only reads the names of the fields of the elements that you are scanning, it also looks at the data itself and can tell you, hey, here is a social security number. This is a bank account number from Canada. This is an account number from the US. Whatever you want to do. And those, there may be, I don't know, hundreds, 200, 300 out-of-the-box classification rules that are already set up in the tool. And we started with those out-of-the-box classification. Yeah, sure.
How effective was the classification? There was a lot of over identification of attributes, essentially saying this could be a bank account, but it was like a birthday or something.
No, actually it was pretty accurate. I don't know if because our data is kind of structured in a way that so it never say this is a telephone number and this is a bank account number. It always did it pretty well. So it identified names, addresses, and we went to the OGC, the General Counsel and Compliance. They say, well, it's not only about having one element of PII in one of the data sources. How about if you can link that PII with other elements in other data sources? To do that in a tool that only catalogs the data, it's impossible. Because we have these APIs here, we were able to do it in a sense that we scan one, and maybe we come up with a social security number. We scan another, and we come up with a name. Those two are separate data sources, but using the APIs, we're able to put them together and say, hey, this is a problem. You are, maybe you are compliant in a sense that you're not putting those together in your database, but you're not compliant in the sense that you're allowing one single user to use both. So back to the question, as far as we saw, and I have to say we're still in, well, not POC, we're already, let's say, in production. We haven't scanned all over the data sources, but our EDW, that it's 12 terabytes, we didn't find any problem of misclassification. And that's using the out-of-the-box classification rules that Microsoft provides, which also can be customized. And that's when I'm talking about incrementally using your tool to move to the business and say, hey, we can do this much better. Yeah?
What are primary uses of data catalog? I'm asking, I guess, about, to store the metadata definitions, but what else?
So, what else do you use it for? Oh, so.
And I have a second question.
Yeah.
What are the processes of, I guess, certifications around the metadata or around the data sets?
Okay, so the first question, the uses are plenty in a sense of, so our first use that we wanted to do is how we can provide the data to the business that are asking us to maybe write an ETL to bring something. So we needed to understand the data and see where it was. And because we as data engineers were able to find that, we can provide it also to users, and we can start federating the use of data in a sense that, hey, go to the catalog. There's a catalog, it'll tell you what database you can access, and it'll tell you what the data is, and you can access directly. And I'm going to show you at the end, the tool is providing other functionality for data sharing, for instance. You can share the data through the tool instead of creating alternate processes to be able to share the data. And the second question was? Certification. Yeah, so we have different ways of doing that. We are working, for instance, with the General Counsel Office and Compliance, and this is one of the first use cases that we saw, in a sense that they spent, I think, a month and a half to 2 months sending emails to all the departments saying, I need you to tell me if these 20 data elements are in your databases. And you have, I don't know, 50 people responding to emails saying, yes, no, yes, it's here, it's there, it's there. When we saw that problem, we said, let's run it here. And in minutes, we can tell you, hey, these are your data sources, these are the elements that you're caring about. So compliance is important. Now, information governance, in a sense, of how to certificate that the data that you're putting out there is the correct one or not, is something that we have to look forward. So it's not something that we have done yet. So right now, we say that the metadata is certified in a sense that it points us to where the data is and where the sources are, but maybe not necessarily now we can create that lineage to make, for instance, when we provide data to the markets. We'd say, well, what's the lineage of that report, financial report that you produce, and can somebody certify that that lineage is correct? We can do that, we haven't gotten there yet. Then executive buy-in. So executive buy-in, what we needed to do was to show the value, and to show the value is like, let's implement it. Let's scan a data source. Let's show what is there. So that use case for compliance was a very important way to sell to the business. Hey, we can do this, and you couldn't do this before. But also people that were asking, and part of what we did is selfish in a sense that we're getting inundated with requests of, hey, where is this data? Where can I get it from? It's like, you know what? Here's your catalog. You go get it yourself. So that's another use case that we use. So, and also got us executive buy-in. We needed to involve everybody. Like we needed to involve information security. It's kind of delicate in a sense that Purview scans all your data sources, so actually has access to all your data sources. Security has to take a look at that. Where are you putting the tool? How you are connecting to the different data sources, the on-prem, the cloud data sources. Are you pulling in actual data from, are you creating PII that it's not? So we have to go through them. Of course, technology, because even though we already have the subscriptions for Azure where we put everything in the cloud, we need to go through them to comply on how to sort of set up those resources and how to create the networking and how to create all those connections that this tool needs. But the most important was the business. So we went to the business owners and say, tell me what data are you more interested in? And let's put your data in and let's work together to make this more reliable and create new classification rules and move this forward. So we created those cross-functional teams. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just a comment. We did a proof of concept of Purview 3 years ago. Then it was too immature for us to go further on it, so happy to hear that it's coming on. But my question was about, are you connecting this notion of data ownership, data asset ownership, CIA evaluation, risks? Are you kind of connecting that into this system as well?
Yes, and I don't know what functionality Purview provided 3 years ago. I think it has increased a lot. So one of the things that we didn't have before is adoption dashboards that the tool provides you and tells you how curated your data is. It's not only to scan it, because you scan it and there it is. Is it curated? Has the owners gone in and certified that data and say, yeah, this is what the data means? And gives you all, out of the box these dashboards that allow you to, little by little, and gives you percentages and say, hey, this data asset is curated at 40%, this one is at 50%. So you can then work with your data owners to say, hey, depending on the business needs, do we have to move this forward or we can relax here? So that is how the tool is incremented. And changes are happening all the time with this tool. So just, I think, a week or 2 weeks ago, Microsoft announced Purview now is not just a tool for data governance, it's a whole framework for information governance, data quality, data sharing. So now security is using Purview to see data usage. We can use Purview for data sharing. We can use Purview for data quality. And they're putting more and more concepts, and I know Microsoft makes this very confusing because they change names to everything. For instance, one day I was looking at the assets that we scan, and we have like 10,000 Power BI reports, and suddenly we don't have any, because now they call Fabric reports, because they changed the concept of how they. So you have to keep up with that, but actually The good thing is incrementally the tool is becoming much better because it's also learning. So they're putting more and more AI into it that allows you to actually make it very useful. So we created those data classification samples to do that POC. We started with a small POC of one SQL server that was on the cloud. Then we grew and created two data warehouses in the cloud. Then we move into our enterprise data warehouse, this 12 terabytes database, and we say, yeah, let's go to the Power BI reports. And we did that, and then can we do the data lakes? Because you have a lot of Excel files in the data lakes that you need to also govern and classify. So now we're getting interested from everybody. It's like, it's not just the data source you have to govern, it's the data usage that you have to govern. And that's how we're moving along with it. Change management, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so what data cataloging or classification did you get out of this? And I'm specifically asking, right, so understanding what you guys did as part of this transactional reference master data and so on. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
So I understand the question, what type of?
When you scan on the data, right?
Yeah.
Classified and identified it. Then did you also look at what reference data are or what master data you have in place and how did you manage that as part of that?
So mostly the classification, as you say, we use the out of the box at the beginning. So to be able to identify PII and then what different structures of PII you have. So you have phone numbers, you have names, you have addresses, you have social security numbers, bank accounts.
Or the core content versus what you guys using the data for?
Yes, so next step that I have another slide that we're going to move, that is the lineage, is, okay, this is what you have, how are you using it? Because we're moving more and more to the cloud, we're creating these data engineering pipelines in the cloud that take data from one place. We're using Synapse Analytics to change, manipulate the data, create ATLs, and then put it maybe in a machine learning mode. So Purview is able to create that lineage and tell you, hey, that machine learning data element that you have comes from this pipeline in Synapse that comes from this data source in Prem or whatever. We are experimenting with it. We haven't finished it, but we already connected it. We used to use Azure, again, Microsoft changing names, Azure Data Factory, now Azure Synapse, which creates those ETL pipelines. And we are able to follow that lineage, and we are able to create now the usage of the data, not just where the data is and what it means. Covering time, I think we're good. Change management. And then, of course, we need to, how are we adopting this? And as I said, Purview is providing us with these dashboards that allow us to see not only how data is curated, but who actually is using it. And remember, one of the first things that I did with the All Data Governance tool is anybody using it actually? And I saw that I was the one using it because I was the one trying to find out who was using it. And I was the main user of the data. It's like, this doesn't make sense. We're putting so much money into it, and actually nobody's using them. So we had 5 users, and 3 were the people that were putting the data in. The other was me that trying to see who uses the data, and maybe somebody lost there that's trying to actually get value from the so that, and this tool allows us to actually follow who's using it, for what type of elements are they using. You can then cross-reference if that usage is by data element, by data source, by lineage, by classification. So it allows us to do a lot of things. And again, I want to stress this out again. This was a low-budget POC that we started because we didn't have the money to say. And now we went through all architecture review board, and we went actually to the executive board, and we now have the green light to actually implement this fully, which again is going to cost maybe 1/10 of what the old tool cost us. Where are we moving next? So basically, as I said, the platform is evolving. It's changing all the time. So definitely we want to bring all our data sources, and we are working on that. We're creating new APIs, and we are creating new software using, because again, I said this is based on Apache Atlas, and this is open API. It's not completely documented in a sense that you need to maybe, some of the documentation is in Purview, some APIs you call from Apache. But if you're able to do the engineering, you're able to actually use those APIs not only for moving data from old sources to new sources, but also to exploit the data, as I said, trying to cross-reference data sources and classification sources. Not only do you use PII or part of PII in one element and another, we're creating this software that allows us to cross-reference those. The other is data sharing. You can create rules for data sharing. You can create pipelines that the tool will ask. So instead now, and we haven't implemented this yet, instead of somebody asking for access to a database, they're going to ask for usage of specific data. And we can create any type of rules. For instance, if we say, yeah, you can access this data and you're going to use it through Purview, whenever they see the data, we put a rule there that said, let's mask the social security numbers. Whatever they get is going to be social security, it's masked. So we don't have to go and write specific ETLs for particular users on how to use the data. So data sharing is becoming very, very important. The other one, as we talked about, is ETL lineage. It's how the data is moving. And not just to reports from sources, but also to ML models. We can actually now connect, because we are building more machine learning models in Azure, and we're using the Azure machine learning, and so we are able to connect those also for lineage in Purview, which is huge in a sense that how scrutinized now the machine learning models are, we are going to be able to tell where the data is coming from. Advanced classification, not only the classification that comes out of the box, but also classification that we can actually manipulate and say, we know what our policy numbers look like. Let's put some rule that tells us if there's a policy number somewhere, and not only in a data source, but maybe in a Power BI report. And so those are things that are coming up. I don't have it here because when I prepared this, we didn't hear the announcement by Microsoft that they were now putting all this into one single Purview framework where data quality is going to be part of it. That's going to be huge also. Usage of data and measurement of usage of data is going to be part of it. I don't know if it's readable, but the graphic on the top talks about the data sources that we have scanned. So we have almost everything there. We have SQL Server, we have Oracle, we have Power BI reports, we have data lakes, we have data warehouse of Synapse Analytics, we have Azure SQL, we have on-prem SQL, and we're able to scan all this into one single environment that we're able to actually look on the usage. And on the bottom is some of the classification that that we've been doing, and it can tell us, for instance, names or social security number. Where are they? Are they in files? Are they in data lakes? Are in the Power BI reports? Are they in structured data? Where are those? And we can point to the business or to technology, say, hey, be careful, this database you're preparing has this amount of data, or hey, you have that user that in this subscription has files in Excel that are copying bank accounts, so be careful with that. So there's a lot of things that we're doing to that. Yeah, sure.
The files, the data lake, or maybe they're two different things, are what kind of reading into the files is this capable of doing? Is it able to get into the files?
Yeah, so for instance, when you're talking about Power BI, we have Power BI reports in Power BI workspaces in the cloud. So it's able to actually look at the metadata of the Power BI and see what is in there. If it's an Excel file, it's able to look at the data if you let them to see what data is in there. I haven't tested like Word documents. It's something that I think it can do. I have not gotten there yet.
And then Snowflake? Yes? No?
I think it has a connection to Snowflake. We don't use Snowflake, so it's not something. So we use Oracle Teradata, we use DB2, we use SQL in the cloud and out of the cloud, Power BI, but not. One thing that we're missing, for instance, we have a huge amount of ETLs written in Informatica Power Center. That this doesn't read directly Informatica Power Center ETLs, but my previous work at Hanover, I wrote code to extract the metadata from a Power BI, which is our XML files, and process those, and we put them in a knowledge base where it's like a graph database where you're going to follow. That we can plug into Purview. So we were going to be able to see these 12,000 ETLs, what's the lineage, and maybe show it in the tool.
Last question. Did you, I mean, I heard low budget, I heard Hanover, did you have third parties? Like we looked at Purview a couple years ago as well, Microsoft being all things
It was me and my team. So we have consultants that help us with Azure, but I knew we were not going to get the budget to hire them. So it's like, let's focus. So actually, it was two of us that did all this work, the APIs, the Apache, the installation, and which talks about how low cost it is, because you don't need many people. You just need people with nothing to do like me.
It's simply turning on the entitlement depending on what level of Microsoft customer you are. It's already there.
Yeah.
But, I was just curious if you.
Yeah, so I launched it, I set it up, I didn't ask technology, and they came later and say, why are you doing this? But, but that's how it went. Thank you. Yeah? So I don't know if there's any questions about strategy, where we are in implementation, but if, I think our emails, yeah.
Can you talk about from the business side, who has access to Purview, or who you envision in the future when it's fully implemented to have access?
Anybody that uses data. So first of all, it was a catalog. So anybody that wants to know where data is and what data means will have access. And you can set many different levels of access. You can have people that are able to scan data. You have people who only can see definitions. There you see people who can run reports of classification. So I see anybody that will use data should have access at different levels. Technology should have access to see lineage, to see sources, to be able to write their own code. So at different levels, I would say anybody in the company should have access to it. But again, you said, it's like Azure that you said groups, and this group has access as a contributor, and this has access as a reader. But you can do that reader by data source or by classification, for instance, so you can do any type of combination that you want. Okay, yeah.
One of our challenges is connecting the kind of data governance requirements to the operational kind of management. It goes on. It's not just the one thing, getting everything in there to look at. It's what's going on over time.
Continuously.
That you have an asset owner, they take care of the risk, you do these things. And in my head, that has to be coupled with some kind of workflow, some kind of notifications, something that helps you actually do the work. Are you thinking about the same thing?
Yeah, so as I see it more as a practitioner of somebody that implements it, we need data governance in a sense that, hey, you cannot put out a project if you don't follow certain procedures. And as you say, if we have this great tool that I scanned everything, and tomorrow technology is putting out 10 new databases and they don't see this, it's been worthless. So right now we have certain criteria for projects to be accepted. For instance, one is go through security review. So we are, in the data strategy that we're putting out is, data governance has to be one that it checks and say, yeah, you went through the process of data governance, so your project can go live. And until we do that, then we have that risk of people putting 1 million assets, and which that can happen, but also because we already have the tool that can see all these assets, even if they're new, we know where they are, we can actually pull them and say, hey, there are 10 new databases that nobody has classified. So we can definitely see it without them telling us that database exists, because we have access to the subscriptions, to the cloud, to the on-prem. So if somebody creates a new table in the EDW, we can tell them there's a new table and nobody has put any definitions in it. So that the tool helps us to do that, to say, hey, you're not complying to the rules that we set up.
But the other thing too, though, like the head of technology and the CISO came and said, well, when you start doing this, what's going to happen when you find all these things? How are you going to fix them? Who's going to fix them? So at first we started using, we have a ticketing system service now, so but as we do more and more of this, the more things we find, we have to come up with processes. Who owns them? How are we going to fund them? So you're right. I mean, we've got to figure all of that stuff out. Like, because we'll find things, and if we don't fix them, now we know about them. And so I think that's, some of these companies bury their head, and they don't turn it on because I don't want to know, right? So now it's kind of like we turned it on, we start finding things, and now we've got to come up with the processes to fix them.
It's just a continuation of your question, which, great question, because communication also, it's like, it's a continual process. Do you have data council that you work through so that the different departments, are you communicating it there? How do you
Yeah, so we have a data council that meets every month where everybody's represented, the business, technology, data, and that's where we put out the data governance guidelines and the machine learning model guidelines. That's where we got approved to use Purview. So that's where we communicate, and that's where we are trying to use also to bring more people into, when I say change management, it's not just teaching people how to use the tool, is having people help us to make the tool better. It's like, how do you classify better the tool? How it actually give you value? It's like, what are you looking for the tool? And because it's so flexible, we're able to bring those people together. But yeah, it has to start with that data governance overseeing council that provides us.
But the other thing too is we had a tool that no one was using. We didn't really have processes and procedures. We're kind of feeling our way around in the dark. The hard part about this is some companies are way behind, some are okay, and some are very advanced, right? So these guys were way back here, right? And so part of it, we're feeling our way through. We have a data governance advisory council. A lot of these things we're tripping over are new things that we have to deal with as we trip over them, rather than we had some big master plan to deal with them. Do you know what I mean? We didn't know what we didn't know as we kind of went down this path. But where we were just kind of stuck in neutral, right? We had this tool that no one was using. We didn't really have anything. So part of this was a way for us to kind of push data governance forward that we knew we could do because we didn't have to go in and ask for $10 million or $1 million, right? We knew we could kind of force this conversation and kind of, get people to adopt it. And part of it, again, Purview's going to probably get us 70 or 80% of the way there. Then I can take that other 20% and go back to Senior Lead and say, how much is it worth for you to fix this 20%? Do you need it fixed? Is it okay to ride with this? You know what I mean? So part of it is just trying to push this along because we need it. I mean, you want to be data driven, you want to be analytically driven, you need to have data governance, right? Or it's not going to work. Yes, sir.
So I kind of come back to my questions again. It looks really interesting, but I mean, what do you guys do about like master data or reference data? Is there anything you have been doing so far? Is it still coming?
Nope.
Or you don't really care about?
It's not that we don't care about it, but again, it's kind of like you start talking about master data management to people that don't even understand basic data governance, right? And now it's that's got all the signs in front of it, and people start glossing over. So part of it is we're trying to spoon feed them this, right, and get them to a point. We understand master data management is important. We got to get to that point, but the conversation wasn't even being had at this company about data governance. You know what I mean? So part of it is just getting them to start thinking about it more and showing them kind of what's wrong and how we can be better. They don't understand a lot of kind of what goes on to make the sausage behind the scenes because they get their reports. You know what I mean? So part of it is trying to show the value of this to them. It's been a tough road.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.